The New Orleans Saints got positive news regarding star linebacker Demario Davis this Tuesday, but unfortunately, they got some bad news on the offensive side of the football. Taysom Hill and Cesar Ruiz suffering injuries, leaving practice early. We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? It's your host of the Straight Up Saints podcast, Chris Rosvoglu. And as always, this program is brought to you by Scott Kendre, injury lawyers. If you've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore, Scott Kendre handles it all. You can give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. And speaking of Scott Kendre Injury Lawyers Group, let's talk about the Scott Kendre injury update of the entire day. And there's a lot to get to. So we'll start off with some good news. Then we'll get to some bad news, and then we'll bring it back to some good news to close. So let's start off with the first piece of good news here, and that's star linebacker Demario Davis back at practice this Tuesday, participated in the stretch with the rest of the team, and then he did some light work off to the side. Now, was it a strenuous day for Demario Davis? It wasn't, but the fact that he was back at the facility, getting some light work in, that's encouraging for the Saints, because I think if you look at this team, while you may love the linebacker duo of Demario Davis and Pete Werner, and I think you should, and there's a very strong argument to be made that it's one of the best linebacker duos in all of football, especially in the NFC South, I think that you have to understand there's not a lot of depth at that position. So if Demario were to miss time, that leaves a huge hole in this defense, and it's not just about the production, because Lord knows he is an uber productive player. We're talking about an excellent leader. We're talking about a guy that is the quarterback of the defense. And with New Orleans being less than a month away from that season opener, you want to make sure he's as close to 100% as possible. And if possible, get him to 100% for that season opener against the Titans. So this is a step in the right direction. There's still more work to do, but the fact that he's out there, and again, he's going to have 20 plus days to get ready for that season opener, I feel good about Demario being ready. Love to hear that. I think that's excellent news for the Saints. But like I said, guys, there's some bad news here, and the bad news is on the offensive side of the football. Taysom Hill, Cesar Ruiz, both of them leaving practice early. Taysom Hill, an oblique strain. Cesar Ruiz, a shoulder injury that actually stemmed from the preseason opener. And I'm going to be honest, if you go through a bunch of guys that played well, Cesar Ruiz, you can argue, was just an absolute mauler out there and maybe the most impressive out of the group. He was outstanding on Sunday, and I would advise people, if you want to go get some film study on him, go check something out that Deuce Wyndham did. You can also go look around and see what Brian Baldinger did on Twitter if you want something short form. Just great film study on the offensive line. So Cesar Ruiz, shoulder injury, oblique strain for Taysom Hill. Both concerning, right? Because Cesar Ruiz is your starting right guard, and Taysom Hill is that Swiss Army knife. Do whatever you want with him on offense. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. I mean, he could go be the water boy if he needs to. The guy does it all. The good news about these injuries is that Dennis Allen said they're not expected to be major. And in fact, he said that neither of them are really going to be serious. So for New Orleans, you got to take that and be pleased with it at the end of the day. Now, oblique strains can be tricky. And I think with Taysom Hill, unfortunately, injuries have kind of followed him the last couple of years. So I would definitely be more concerned about that. As for Ruiz, look, I don't think he has to play the last two preseason games, if I'm being quite honest anyway. I think Ruiz is starting to show that he's more of the player that we saw last year than he is the player that we saw the first couple of years of his career. And I think that's great news for the Saints. I think that's great news for his confidence and his ability to cash out. Because remember, this is going to be a contract year for him. So it's not great that they're hurt right now. Don't get me wrong. But the severity isn't to a high degree. So that's good for the Saints. And look, if DA is not going to panic about it right now, you got to kind of trust the coach with what he says in that regard. So those two hurt, but nothing too serious. And like I said, I'll finish it off with some good news here, as it's just going to be somewhat of a quick video variety for you guys. Let's talk about Kendre Miller, rookie running back from TCU. Knee sprained on Sunday against the Chiefs. Saints go out and get Darrell Williams, the former Chiefs running back and former LSU guy. So you feel like, okay, how serious is the injury? Well, he says the imaging came back positive for Kendre Miller in a good way. And that's obviously encouraging for the team. And Kendre Miller's imaging was so good that he's actually going to travel with them to California. Remember, they play the Chargers this upcoming Sunday for their second preseason game. So, I mean, look, there's a slight chance he plays, and Dennis Allen said there's a chance he'll be available. I don't see how they rush him, but the fact that there's a chance he'd be available for this Sunday leads me to believe that Saints fans don't have to worry about Kendre Miller's week one status. As long as he doesn't re-aggravate that knee, as long as he doesn't tweak it in, a follow-up practice, a follow-up preseason game, whatever it may be, that's awesome news for New Orleans. because you can go into week 1 now having Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, and Darrell Williams, and you can just roll with that trio. And I think that'll be more than enough during Alvin's absence. And I think if Kendre Miller's healthy and he's ready for week 1, maybe that's less stress about Taysom Hill. Like, let's say you have to rest Taysom Hill for a week to make sure that oblique is 100%. Taysom Hill, you could use him in that running variety week 2, week 3. You don't have to rush him necessarily if you feel like you got 3 backs who can handle those short yardage situations and can be those tough-nosed runners. And I think that those guys can in Jamal, in Darrell Williams, and also Kendre Miller. So good news on him that his imaging was encouraging. And just overall, you would hate to see a rookie's first season just start off with a bunch of injuries and never really get their footing under them. And that's what I was starting to get worried about with Kendre Miller. Had the injury at minicamp, or recovering from an injury at minicamp, so you didn't get to see a lot of him there. And then first preseason game, you get banged up, and you start to wonder, is your first year just going to be a wash because of injuries? Doesn't seem to be the case. So overall, guys, like I said, Demario back at practice, light work off to the side, but that's a step in the right direction for week 1. Taysom and Cesar Ruiz leave early, but it's not severe, according to Dennis Allen. And then Kendre Miller is going to fly with the team to California. So that's just great news for the rookie. Can be around Jamal, can be around Alvin, will be able to kind of soak up some of that knowledge, and hopefully that pays dividends down the road. But overall, guys, that's going to do it for this quick edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. As always, guys, I encourage you to subscribe to Boot Crew Media's YouTube page so you're staying in touch with content like this, Pelicans content, LSU content, Tulane content, everything on the platform. We have it here for you. And as always, stay tuned for more content here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.